So, yeah, so we see why Joe's people probably don't want him talking too much. Now,
Yeah.
to be honest,
Well, let's
first of
let's 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 go ahead and restate what he said.
yeah, first of all, we're on that ish, and so is Joe. Joe's really on that ish. I'm Flavius Maximus with my esteemed co-host and creator of the show, Ish, uh, otherwise known as Issue X. And today's issue is Joe Biden and another gaffe that he brings us. Um, do you know the show that he was on? Uh,
I don't.
that was today's date, right? That was
Yeah,
August
that was today, August
6th.
6th.
So Joe's on a show, and I kind of like I almost didn't catch it because I thought maybe I heard it wrong, or I thought maybe
Right?
it was the end of another sentence that I kind of like heard wrong. But Joe basically says, unlike the African American community, the Latinx. Did he use the word Latinx?
I believe he said Hispanic or Latin.
Okay.
We'll say Latinx for just the
Okay.
purposes.
The Latinx community is what, very diverse. You got
Is
folks.
very diverse.
You got folks in Arizona who believe one thing. You got folks in Florida. It's a diverse group with varying ideas and beliefs and etc.
Yes, he was emphasizing on immigration. Now, it's interesting because he prefaced those statements with, he spoke to the hosts and he said, as you or your colleagues, so to speak, know, unlike most people. Well, he didn't say unlike most people. He was like, but most people may not know. Then he said, unlike the African American community, with the exception of some people of note or some notable exceptions. He then went on to say exactly
Okay,
what you said.
okay. So not only is he kind of saying that black people are monolithic, well, at least on this issue, right? He was
Hmm.
particularly speaking about on immigration. He's saying black
Right.
people all think the same when it comes to immigration. Uh, Latinx people do not. Not only did he state that, but he was saying, as the interviewer knows, right?
Right.
Right. He was assuming that the interviewer agrees with him and has some inside information based on whatever well of knowledge that they're pulling from. So he's kind of like co-conspirator, right? Like, ish, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
You know how they do. I
Yeah.
mean, not
Yeah.
everybody knows, but you know. You
Yeah.
know what I'm
Yeah.
talking
Yep. Yep.
about. And he realized the cameras were on, right? Like this wasn't like he thought he was buddying with them, you know, with the cameras off. Or yeah, I'm waiting to see what the spin's gonna be from
No.
him and his camp.
So for me, right, I want to, because I've seen people have this conversation where, for the purposes of what he said, they differentiate between Black people in the African American community. I want to be
Okay.
clear that I'm not making a differentiation, because I don't think that Joe Biden, when he says African Americans, he means something different than just Black people in America.
Right.
You
African
know,
American, as in Africans who came to America. Is that what people mean? Or
well,
what is,
somebody mentioned, Jamaican people, and somebody responded by saying that, Jamaicans aren't African American. And I didn't engage in that conversation, but my thought process is like, what are you talking about? Like, what do
oh,
you mean?
it's you know
You
what?
know,
This sounds like This sounds like the ADOS folks.
no, 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 no. It was actually, and we'll discuss it later with that person, but it was actually in our group chat.
Oh, okay. Okay, so
I posted the video
okay.
there.
Okay,
So I
so
don't want to get into that now, but that was
they're
just something that I
differentiating.
saw.
They're differentiating between black folks, aka, you know, American born. sons and daughters of the diaspora, uh, in contrast with Jamaicans, uh, any other group that's not like, you know,
I,
that's
I
not
don't
like
even know what
black.
the angle was. I don't even know
Okay.
why it was even worth making a differentiation. Because to me, doing that is saying, just to me, from my understanding, is saying that Joe Biden is talking about a specific group of black people when he says African Americans, and I don't think he is.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. No. But then again, the way he said, you know what I mean.
I mean,
Like it's some inside. No, I mean that would be ridiculous for an interview, right? Like you would want to set the
hmm
table so folks would know what you're talking about.
hmm
But who knows what the spin's going to be? Because there's got to be some spin coming, right?
I mean,
Or
he'll be
maybe not.
scrutinized. He'll
Or
be criticized. He'll be scrutinized for it. He'll have to answer some questions. I mean, this is the same guy, right, who stood before like a black caucus and a bunch of black leaders, and he had to answer for what he said on Charlemagne's show.
right.
In his interview with Charlemagne. You know what I mean? He had so I'm sure, people are gonna be like, wait a minute.
You
We
know what's
just held you to account
yeah.
for, these things that you said. Where I don't think that they're gonna. I mean,
You
what
know,
are we doing here? Are we going?
just what's odd about that video is I felt it coming. Like there was something odd in the air. Like
He's like, he's been too quiet.
and it's only a minute, and then I realized, like, wow, this train derailed quickly. It's only a
Quickly,
minute
right?
video.
Like,
It's
went
only
right
like
off the tracks.
he couldn't like hold it down for a minute. I mean, of course, who knows like how long they were talking before, blah blah blah. So
You're right.
I shouldn't judge
Right.
it on the length of the video per se,
And,
because that's
and of course,
you know
anyone that's in opposition to him, which is where I got the video from before I researched it myself and went and checked it out myself, right? Anyone that's in opposition for him, that's the clip,
oh okay.
right?
So we
That's the
don't
clip.
so we
Doesn't
don't know
matter
if
if it
it
was
was
an hour
edited.
interview.
So
That's
we
the
don't even
clip.
know how it was edited, because there
Right.
have been some shady things. Like, do you remember a few years ago? Um, who was telling me? Well, I won't even go there. Who told me about the video, because I might just not want to mention who it was. But there was this video, and of course it was BLM, right? It's always like
hmm
it's always blamed on like BLM, as if people marching in the street are like this cohesive group that's from this organization, right? And you can always
hmm
just tell by watching the video. I love how you can just tell it's BLM just by watching the video. But the quote was, the soundbite was, kill a cop, right? They were saying that BLM marchers were marching down the street saying, kill a cop, kill a cop. So, long story short, you watch the actual video, and they were saying, we won't stop till killer cops are in jail blocks or something like that.
Right.
But what they did was they just edited that video so it was kill a cop, right? We won't stop till killer cops. Not even the S on the end. That's how
Right.
much they truncated the video just for their, this was like a Fox News piece. So
Well,
you never know.
I do feel like if that video was made to look a certain way because of who it is and what we're dealing with, that it won't stay on YouTube.
Oh, like that, like YouTube has been stepping up its
Right. But that's just
okay.
my feeling on that. That if it wasn't, if you take a soundbite,
Yeah.
and that was a long enough soundbite to where we don't necessarily have a context of what the nature of the interview was, but she was leading into, relations with Cuba,
Right.
which is what her lead up question was.
Right.
And then he just kind of went into, he just was like, let's just take this train over there in the grass. Let's just see if we can navigate it through the meadow. right off these tracks, right off these rails, so to speak. You know what I mean? Here, give me just a second. I don't want this to die, so I want to just grab my charger really quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we are recording. We're back.
So it's interesting though, because imagine what we're gonna get if this guy has to do speeches. Well, he will have to do speeches, right?
Mm-hmm. So my thing is, if he's going to go off the rails during a speech, maybe he can memorize somebody else's words, right? People have speechwriters. There are famous speechwriters, like Obama had speechwriters. One of his speechwriters I don't know if he wrote a book recently or he was definitely interviewed recently and had some interesting things maybe to say about the current administration.
See, Joe reminds me or strikes me as the type of guy that would think it would be sensible to ad-lib where he could. You know what I mean? Like he just strikes me as that person that thinks that, this is cool to say and it's not.
Right. Plus,
it's not.
Yeah, and he also strikes me as someone who kind of turns up whether or not he really means to, right? Mm-hmm. Like these aren't like a gaffe obviously isn't planned, but if you've seen him get angry with people, that it's totally like, whoa, that doesn't look good for your career to be getting angry with a Joe citizen off the street that you're talking to like get in his face like angry. Like I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? This is someone who's supposed to be presidential. So if he turns up that much on Joe citizen, you can imagine what he might do during a speech if he's getting excited. And when people decide between reading off of something and having something sound more dynamic and exciting, if you've ever bombed a speech because you were reading off of a paper or sticking too much to the script, you're almost like, I'd rather make some mistakes and sound more like me and sound more exciting than get caught reading off of a paper. So
when in reality you can just read off of a paper. That's what I do.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, that is the skill. I mean, you can read off of a paper and still make it sound dynamic, but
realism, and that's the foot that I'd be putting forward. Like, I'm a real person, right? Like, I'm not an actor. I don't memorize monologues for a living. I'm not a speechwriter.
Right.
And that's just, that would be, that would be how I would present things. Like, what are we doing here? I'm a politician.
Yeah.
I don't memorize speeches. I'm not an actor. You understand what I'm saying? Sure. I'm not a speechwriter. I'm a politician. People write my speeches. Definitely the content of the speech is certainly born in my thought processes and in my politics. For sure. I have input the whole nine. But This is the reason why we have people in place to do these things. And like, I have no problem telling you, like, I'm reading a speech.
Yeah, maybe the deal is we kind of don't want to, what's the word I'm looking for?
Acknowledge what we know to be true.
Yeah, we don't want to acknowledge what we know to be true, and we don't want to kind of, I don't know, what would you call it, break the fourth wall, or like, what is it called? Suspend the
Right, suspend disbelief.
Yeah, we want to keep
suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, we want to keep disbelief suspended as much as possible.
Yeah, I know. I first encountered my frustration with things like this with, back when George Bush was criticized for having parts of his speech written on his hand during an interview. And I'm like, like, the guy is not supposed to be, some actor. If he has to spend hours of his day memorizing something, like, what are we really getting out of our president?
Yeah, but the thing,
you could be doing other things.
The thing with Bush, though, was he already had he was already in a place where he was looked upon as having lesser intelligence. So we're comparing him to other people. Like you can say so, but if we haven't seen other presidents do it, and we already think this is a dumber president than other ones, then we're only adding to the new myth, or adding to the, you know.
That's an interesting observation, because you said, some key things there. If we haven't seen, it doesn't mean that they haven't done it.
Sure.
We just haven't seen it. And, I remember listening to Stephen A. Smith talk some years ago. Obviously he's a sports journalist, and, he is one of the hosts of First Take, but he was talking about kind of like how some athletes tend to be standoffish with reporters, and they don't want to give interviews, or they want to give these type of interviews that don't assist the reporter and the reporter doing their job. And he said, they have a right to do that, but it's something that he said that just kind of clued me in about a lot of things when it comes to the media, right? He said the relationship that an athlete builds with a reporter determines how a reporter reports on said athlete.
Okay.
Like the athlete could suck, but because I have a relationship with you, while I might write an interview speaking to, that it's the difference between me saying, this guy is horrible, his numbers are hurting the team, versus this guy's numbers are down this year. I'm reporting the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm reporting it from a different angle. One is more favorable to you than the other, because of the relationship that we've built or that we have. And I kind of look at that across media, right? Like if some reporter who thinks that, and maybe I don't even agree with Barack Obama politically, but we had a conversation before the cameras came on, and I just think this guy's a gentleman and a scholar and he's cool. So I see his notes on his hand, but I don't say anything. I just choose not to say anything, because this guy's just, the conversations that we had prior to the cameras being turned on, this guy's just a cool guy.
But in the back of your mind, you're like, haven't seen that one before. Mm-hmm. Or like you almost kind of want to.
Or maybe I see it all the time, but in George Bush's case, we're going to say something.
I guess. I mean, come on, man. Like, do you think? I mean, George Bush was like so special that they decided to out him and never out anyone else? Like, what is?
Well, I think that a lot of things were working in our country, in society as a whole, at the time when George Bush was in office, right? We're talking, early 21st century. We're talking the rise or birth of social media. We're talking like a lot of different things were taking place that hadn't been around just 10 years prior. So now you see this type of a different type of media criticism, and for every president in the 21st century, than we did at the end of the century beforehand. Not saying that there wasn't criticism. Well, you just see a different type, because now it's like social media, and it's like, everybody wants to picture with George Bush's hand with the some ink on it.
Well, remember our discussion, that a brief discussion about how much Dan Quayle was lampooned. I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So, I mean, Bush was lampooned for a reason.
And, I mean, all of them were all of them were lampooned.
Sure, but Bush, for certain reasons, that in certain ways that his father was not. His father was not deemed a dumber man. His father was not seen as goofy like that, and his father was seen as more presidential, and so that whole notes on the hand thing kind of plays into the perception.
That just kind of speaks to my point, though, because his father also didn't preside over the country in the social media era.
I don't blame the social media thing. His
I
father
didn't
was
blame it. I think it makes things, it's more accessible. It's like when you look at an athlete, right? We have
but
more access into the just
either
the,
did Dan Quayle though.
well, he didn't preside ever.
Okay, so for someone who didn't preside, he sure got enough media attention for being a bit of a goofball.
He didn't get social media attention though.
No, because social media didn't exist.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah, but that's what
Social
my point
media
is. My point
changes the
is your point
dynamic.
is your point is moot
Well, I
because
don't think so.
we
I think it
didn't
certainly
need.
contributes.
Well, sure, it contributes, but we didn't need social media in order to lampoon Quayle because Quayle was who he was, and we made fun of him for who he
Yeah,
was.
but I think you miss a part of my point. I said as much. I said that there was the people were no less critical, that there is a different type of criticism because we have more access. It's kind of like athletes now, right? We didn't know Michael Jordan was a jerk back in the day because there wasn't Twitter. There wasn't
Yeah,
Instagram.
yeah. I mean, some people did, but certainly not a lot. Certainly, a
Right.
lot of people did not. Certainly, a lot of people did not.
It became easier to lampoon. Look at what Barack Obama's critics did. It just became easier because social media as a tool makes people more. It's easy for us to access them, or even access information that we otherwise might not have. You might have had to caught it in a specific newspaper.
You're making a good point, but it's like it's just not well. It's just Bush doesn't deserve your Bush doesn't deserve that kind of defense.
I didn't defend him. What I said was if he has to put his notes from his speech on his hand, so based on the fact that I don't expect realistically any president, whether Bush is considered dumber than the rest or not, I don't expect any of them. I don't think Barack Obama was memorizing his speeches. That's all I'm saying. I'm not defending him. I'm saying so. And I would say that again for any president. Like, so remember, I started this, if you remember, I started this conversation by saying, if it were me, I would just tell you, my job isn't to write speeches or to memorize speeches. And if that were my job, then I think that I would be wasting my time in the capacity of president when there are other things that I could be focused on.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I guess my point is that if you were president, you would not come off like George Bush came off. So here's my thing: if someone talked shit about you writing your speech on your hand, I gotta wonder what they're trying to get at. Are they trying to say Ish doesn't belong there, or Ish blah blah blah? Like, what are they trying to get at? With Bush, I know why they're doing it because I know the way he was viewed, and we were there. I went through it. We all thought he was stupid. We did. I mean, we had discussions, whereas people were like, "Oh, I heard he memorized all this stuff during college. Like he knew people by name, and being in a frat, you had to memorize certain things. So he's probably not as dumb as you think." Like we have these conversations all the time. So that just adds to his speech on his hand.
It adds to a narrative.
Or the book Upside Down, whether or not that was even a true picture, which I heard it wasn't. I heard that whole do you know what I'm talking about? The famous picture
with him reading a book upside down
to kids. Yeah.
During September 11th.
Yeah. I heard that wasn't a true picture, but it adds to a narrative of something we kind of know already. That being said, there are smoother ways to do it, because there was another rumor that he used to have an earpiece, and that they used to pipe in the speeches through his ear. Now, if that's the case, at least that's smarter and smoother. So
I was going to say that's smart.
Yeah, smarter and smoother so you can't get caught out there. So part of it is like, yeah, all right. I mean, if it's tough for you, like me personally, I don't know. I've got some things like I was never good at memorizing song lyrics. I don't know how hard I actually tried, but it seemed like other people could do it without trying. I always kind of like made up my own or fumbled the lyrics a little bit. But at the same time, when I was growing up, we had these Easter speeches we used to do, and I always picked like some of the longest ones, and they were long by far, and I memorized them. I mean, one year I messed up a bit, but that thing was so long, I still got props for doing it. So um, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but
Well, you're also not the president.
right. I'm also not the president, and nowadays they have teleprompters and stuff like that. Um, I kind of feel like by the time because you were saying that uh, Bush was around in an interesting time where we were going through a lot of changes, even technologically. I kind of feel like definitely by the end of his administration, he could just read off of the teleprompter.
I agree
So
for sure.
we probably went from his hand to the earpiece to the teleprompter. That would be a very interesting story and like perspective to have written. You know.
So Biden strikes me as the type of person that would have had some notes on his hand.
I I don't I don't I don't know about that. If he were, he wouldn't get found out. People wouldn't see the notes on his hand. He wouldn't get
Bruh,
caught out there.
bruh. This is a guy who, when he opens up his mouth, he shows cards that he doesn't even need to show.
Right.
Like,
That's a different gap. That's different gap material. That's a guy who shoots from the hip, right?
yeah,
Not a guy
but
who trips over his own feet, right? This isn't a
well,
Dan Quayle
well, hold
tripping
on,
over your own feet,
hold
Bush
on, though. What
showing
I
writing on your hand.
Yeah, but what I mean is, like, take for instance what we discussed and what he said today. He didn't have to even mention African Americans. Like, he just didn't have to mention it at all.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. Like,
He could have just said the Latinx community is a very diverse community, so on and so forth.
That would have been great. That would have been a great quote.
I don't even know why he said unlike the African American community. Like, I don't even know where this.
I can tell you
like
why.
you're not shooting from the hip. Like, you have a squirt gun and you're shooting from
from
your ankles.
I can tell you why he said that. Not good, but I can tell you why.
Why do you say it?
Because that's what he thought.
Well, there you have it. I mean, that's hard to overcome. And what I mean is, like, it's hard not to come to that conclusion without any other context.
Yeah.
And hopefully he'll be called to account, and we're gonna get an apology. So what my problem is, and it's not so big of a problem that I'm not going to vote, I still feel some type of way, because, like, how many times do you expect me to just fool me once, right? Shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
How would
If you can just get away and continue to 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 get away with saying these things in regards to the Black community, and you just give an apology, when do I, say, hey, you're not really sorry?
Right. I mean, let's take it in perspective.
Hold on, before you say that, let me just say this. You discounted Black people when you had an interview with Charlemagne, and you apologized for it. And pretty much, what he did today was discount Black people.
Yeah.
So how apologetic were you then? Like when you're sorry about something, you know, they call it in religious circles, one of the terms is repentance, right? And the idea behind repentance is that you're not just sorry and apologetic for it. Your intention is to turn away from it.
Turn away from it. Yep. Never do it again, or don't do it again. Yeah. Yeah. Make amends. Be like, yeah. So, okay. So a few things. I mean, you have said some things that were pretty, I'm going to say controversial for lack of a better word, but there's probably a word that's more suited. But you have said some things where I was like, damn. You have said some things where like people could say certain things, and it doesn't mean they're racist. They're just angry and things like that. And I'm like, I'm just gonna call that person racist because.
Oh, this what we're doing now? This what we're doing, huh? All right.
But we don't have to get into that. But it is. I
No,
mean,
I
it
mean,
does.
I stand on the things I say until I'm educated otherwise, for sure.
Okay. Okay. Um. I mean, do you still feel that way?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Depending on the context and the situation, for sure.
Okay.
And again, anecdotal evidence isn't evidence, right? But my own personal experiences, certain personal experiences lead me to believe that in all cases, it just isn't the case.
Should we give an example of what we're talking about so the audience doesn't scratch their head and
Yeah,
wonder
you
what
can
we're
you can
talking
go
about?
you can go ahead and
Okay. To summarize, I mean, you basically gave an anecdote. I don't know if it was real or if it was just an example, but you were saying like, you know, you're walking down the street past someone's lawn and some white guy starts going off calling you all
no no
types
no
of.
no. How about we do this? I gave a
Okay.
real experience where someone called me a nigger who I don't think is racist.
Okay. Yeah, can you expound on that experience?
So I was having coffee at some friend's house, two older women, white women, and a commotion took place out in the street. We walked out in the street to see what the commotion was. There was a woman who was drunk, who was kicking, we assume was her boyfriend, out of the house. So he had his stuff. He was leaving. She got mad that he was leaving, and she proceeded to like chase him down the street and physically attack him for leaving. And you know, everybody, not just me, not just my two friends, everybody who was in the street was like, leave him alone, let him go. And our concern was if the police come, he's going to get arrested, because it's just kind of always the case, right?
Yep.
This guy's trying to leave, and if something happens as a result of your actions, he's going to bear the brunt of any type of punitive or penal action. At the very least, he's going to lose time because he has to go send a central booking.
Yeah.
Because you won't let him leave. So, we stopped her. She got mad, which, she was already mad. She was already in her feelings. Like, she's drunk and she's crying. And she comes to the edge of the yard and directs her anger towards me. And she uses the N-word.
Okay.
Multiple times. And my immediate conclusion, like, first of all, I told you this before, like, these things don't move me. You don't have the power to control me. You just don't. You know what I mean? I have no emotional investment in you. But my immediate conclusion was, you're upset and I'm your target. Misery loves company. And you want me to feel like you feel. And the only way you think to do it is to throw this word at me. Okay. I would later find out, and again, I could be wrong. This is my personal experience. I would later find out, like, my friends were upset. They wanted to go fight her. These two women wanted to go fight her, and I stopped them. And I'm like, are you serious? She's drunk. One, she's drunk. Two, I recognize the motivation behind her anger. I don't think it's racism. Mm-hmm. I don't really think she even wants to fight me. You understand what I'm saying? Like, are you serious?
Yeah.
So, I would find out later, and this doesn't mean that she isn't racist, but I would find out later, like very soon thereafter. Like, I mean, with the exception of that white guy who was at her house, that's the
She
only
always
other white
dated.
person.
She always dated black people.
It's not that she just always dated black people. That's the only other white person that I've ever seen at her house.
Okay.
There's always just multiple black people at her house.
Okay.
Multiple. So
this, do you think this may have even just been a language thing then, that she's been hanging with black people so long that they're
I didn't
using
consider that.
Okay.
In that instance, I didn't consider that. And even in the instances thereafter, you know, when I saw her thereafter, I didn't consider that at all. She didn't remember me, which I don't know why she wouldn't have remembered me, but I get, my assumption is because she was drunk.
Right.
So, you know, she used to see me all the time afterwards. She lived right across the street from the house that I was at. I'd either be on the front porch every morning having coffee.
You say
You
she
understand
didn't
what I'm
remember
saying?
you before or after, or both?
After.
Okay.
She didn't remember me. You know what I mean? She didn't carry herself like she had a problem with black people at all. So my conclusion.
Did she apologize? So she didn't remember.
She didn't even remember me.
Apologize. Okay.
No, she didn't even remember me. You know what I mean? So, you know, I'm sure had I engaged with her,
right,
I would have impacted her on a greater level, and she possibly could have apologized, or probably not. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
right. I just don't know. What I do, what my conclusion is that my immediate conclusion, and it doesn't mean that she isn't racist. My immediate conclusion wasn't that she challenged me on that level to be racist. That doesn't mean what she did wasn't wrong. Choosing to use a word that is racist, in my opinion, is wrong. That to me doesn't always make you racist.
Okay.
That's what I, you know, just to kind of expound upon that.
Sure.
In most cases, like I said in the show that we had where we talked about it, in most cases, absolutely you are. But I think there are exceptions, which is, you know, I'll stand on that.
All right. So thanks for that. So now let's go back to our buddy Joe. So let's break it down. The things that he's saying, are they that bad, or are they just like, kind of like, I don't know if stupid's the right word. Like, are they that bad, or are they just like little gaffes? Like, in other words, like if you were hanging out with somebody who said some shit like that, I mean, it shit probably wouldn't even affect you. Like, you might just be like, some people, the shit that he said to Charlemagne, some people probably agreed with, but it just certainly shouldn't be coming out of a white man's mouth, let alone someone who's running for president. But again, look at who his competition is also. Not that that's an out, but when we're talking about egregious things that are said that are at the very least insensitive, you know, look at the atmosphere that we're in. But let's break it down. Is what he said actually that bad in the grand scheme of things?
So there's levels to it, in my opinion. If you're asking me, do I think he's racist? The answer is no, based upon everything that he has said to date. The answer is no. However, and there's levels to it, right? Do I think
one question, just to interrupt you? I have to interrupt you. I have someone who could come in to the meeting. How do you feel about that?
I have no problem.
Okay.
Who is this someone?
He's kind of a Facebook buddy of mine. He's always got very interesting things to say. He's got a very interesting perspective. Always,
okay.
I would say a jujitsu level of positive interaction.
Mm-hmm.
I would say he's similar to you in that sense. I would
take
say
that as a compliment if I'm associated with positive interaction. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I definitely give props to people who can do that. I mean, some of the situations that you've spoken about, I think a lot of people would get in their feelings and would react to. I mean, the fact that you can put yourself in a frame of mind, or the fact that you're either in control or you're in a frame of mind where you're not just gonna like jump off or pop off based on people pushing your buttons. That's difficult. even as a person myself who most people considered laid back, I mean, it's hard not to react.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, that is to be looked at with some awe. I feel like he's similar because he's got some people who can be jackasses on his threads, and he always finds a way to like take what they say in perspective and like very poetically. Like he might legit be a poet. Hopefully he clicks on. We'll see. I don't know if I can't remember if we've met up physically back in the day. But we'll see. So Joe, Joe, not a racist, definitely said some things that maybe he should apologize for.
Well, I want to expound upon it though. I want to get into it. So there's levels to it, right? Mm-hmm. Do I think he's racist? No. Do I think that he is out of touch and insensitive? Sure. And I'll take it to another level. I told somebody today, right? That I don't think his comments are unlike some of the egregious things that Donald Trump has said.
Oh, of course. That's
and on the same level, it's just a different spectrum. And what I mean by that is, me and you had this conversation the other day. You brought up the point where, Donald Trump said, calling certain countries, crap hole countries, right? Well, I don't live in those crap hole countries that he's referring to. I don't think that they're crap hole countries, but I don't live there, right? I live here. So in America, it matters to me. There's a difference when you and I make an observation about our culture. When you and I choose to engage someone who's not from our culture, who makes an observation about our culture. There's a difference when someone who is going to be the leader of the free world, and certainly you expect to be sensitive to the various cultures in this country, to their plights, or especially marginalized cultures, to not one in particular, but to all of them, especially because that is your platform, and those people you've acknowledged and in the same breath, you've acknowledged and discounted those people because they put you on your platform. I think that we're speaking like the level, there's levels to it, and on his level, it's not okay. Especially if it's compounded, right? If you have a history of these things, it's not okay.
And you're talking Trump still?
No, I'm talking about Joe Biden. Joe Biden currently has his platform, and it's interesting because in the same breath, when you say things like, if you don't know whether or not you're going to vote for Trump or Joe Biden, you aren't black. It's like, wait a minute. You're recognizing on the one hand that you have your platform because of black people, and then in the same breath, you're discounting black people.
Right.
It matters because of who you are, the platform that you have, and what you aspire to be. It's different for you than if it was, me and Flav having a conversation with a white guy or a Latinx person or, a native person or having the same conversation, and those people say the same thing that based on their own observations or ignorance that Joe Biden said. It's totally different.
Yeah.
Do I think, again, I want to say, I do not think this man is racist. Okay. I do think he is out of touch, certainly insensitive. And what I mean by that, what I mean by his insensitivity, it's offhanded insensitivity.
Right.
Like you're not even, other people. Hold on. Somebody wrote something.
Yes. This is my friend Damien. Damien, have we ever met in person, or are we just Facebook friends?
Oh, well, we may have crossed paths at the Canvassers conference.
That's what I figured. Yeah, way back. How far back? How far back did you start going to Canvassers conferences?
Oh, I mean, this is going back maybe 8 years ago now, I guess. Let's say
8 years, so 2012.
Yeah, I came out of 2009 canvassing. Worked my way through 2 years of canvassing, started to get into field managing a little bit, field managing training, and then that's what got me into some of the conferences.
Oh, okay. So by 2012, I may have missed you because I was off to Nyberg by right your CCE Citizens Campaign for the
Yeah, and you
Environment.
know, everything happened so fast at that time too,
Yeah.
meeting so many people.
Yep.
But
Yep.
many mutual friends, like through Lou Dubs and through a lot of
Yep.
people that I met through canvassing. I think we share a lot of good conversations too through the social networking platform.
Definitely. Definitely. So, Damien, this is my friend Ish, also known as Issue X, who's in dark mode for the moment. He's the creator of this show called On That Ish. I'm the co-creator. And I was telling Ish that you have a jujitsu level skill of taking sometimes negative interactions and keeping them positive and like making a good conversation out of it. A skill that, frankly, I'm in awe of because I've seen some of the people who have, hopped on your posts and some of the things that they've said, but you never really, like my friend Ish, you don't seem to react. You seem to like act like purposefully, and you have like a poetic way of like redirecting the energy and information. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a responding versus reacting kind of
Yeah,
principle, and jujitsu is a very poetic way to put it. I do feel like sometimes they get to be very complicated, wrestling matches for sure, and
definitely.
having a little bit of that wiggle room and poetry definitely does help.
And
Maybe
are you a poet, or is that something that you do? Or
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Art, music, poetry, and comedy, I feel are critical to the, development through many human conditions, but poetry is something I identify with more closely
okay,
and share a lot of where it's needed.
cool.
That's pretty awesome. What I want to do really quickly, I'm just gonna go top off my coffee. Don't
Okay.
pause it. You guys can continue to, chat it up, and I'll be right back. I just want
You
to top
said
off my
don't
coffee.
pause it or do
No,
pause
don't
it.
pause it. No,
Okay.
no, don't pause it.
Okay.
You guys can continue.
Cool.
Damien. So we're talking about. I don't know if you're aware of, and we'll get into it when I come back. But I don't know if you're aware of the comments that Joe Biden made today in an interview.
Oh, no, I miss a lot of current events. I'm so behind. I end up researching rabbit holes, getting lost to the little wormhole
Oh yeah,
pieces.
oh yeah. I know,
So
I know that feeling.
yeah, like even just I posted that bill, the HR 3355. I spent a lot of time reading through it to try and understand more of Joe Biden's language and some of the other things he supported. So my attempt to like search his like 16-year history of career political campaigning, yeah, I definitely do end up missing a lot of current events. So if you want to brief me quick.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well,
So
I'm,
yeah,
I'm
while
gonna
he,
let Flav brief you while I
Thank
go
you.
top off the
you
coffee.
go get your coffee. I'll brief him. So the video, it's only a minute video.
Okay.
I wish I could just actually post it here. So um, Joe Biden is being interviewed. I'm not sure what station it was. The woman is talking about how we're treating some countries a little bit differently than each other. She mentions Cuba and problems with Cubans being able to maybe move freely, back and forth to the U.S. And at another point, I think she mentions Venezuela, and there's some energy there. I could tell that Joe is kind of bubbling underneath it all, like waiting to say something. I could tell he kind of feels passionately about something. And so when Joe speaks, the first thing he says, and I didn't even think I heard it right, was unlike the African American community, the Latinx community is very diverse in how they, I guess, think about immigration and uh, and that sort of thing. Um, and to be honest, the first time I heard it, I didn't even realize he was talking just about immigration. I guess I just thought he was saying the African American community wasn't diverse just in general. And so then he talks about in the Latinx community, you've got Arizona, you've got Florida, you've got different modes of thinking, different attitudes and that kind of thing. And so in the video, they kind of do that when the record scratches thing. after he's made his point, and they go back and let you hear what he said again. And he's like, unlike the African American community, the Latinx community is diverse.
Wow.
So that's what we were talking about, is the gaffes of.
I wouldn't believe it if you didn't tell me, to be honest. That's kind of a ridiculous statement to be making.
So it's an interesting thing, because I was saying to Ish, it's only a 1-minute video. I wonder if there's a context that, you know, we're not hearing from this short video, you know, what was said before, what is about to be said after. But a minute is still enough to hear that sentence. It's still a complete sentence, though, right? It's not like, no matter what was said before or after, it's still like a complete sentence. So then I was even saying to Ish, my spidey senses were tingling, and I wondered if this was a source, if this video was brought up from an enemy of Joe Biden, or, you know, an enemy of the Democrats. And sure enough, Ish told me it was from opposition. And that made me think about a video I saw some years ago, or an audio clip, where people are complaining that BLM is saying kill a cop, when in actuality it came out that the full sentence that they're chanting, and first of all, like, the full sentence that they're chanting, and first of all, how do they even know it's BLM? I always question how people just assume everything's BLM if it's you know, if people are organizing or they're marching or something. But the full sentence that they were saying was, "We won't stop till killer cops are in jail blocks," or something like that. So they just took that little phrase, "killer cops," and because they're chanting, it sounds like "kill cops."
Yeah, rhythm chanting is tough.
Yeah, and I was saying to Ish, that they were so shady about it that they even chopped off the S, right? Because it would have sounded weird if they said kill cops, right? Then you would have been like, huh, I guess it doesn't sound like what I think they're saying, right? Because that doesn't make any sense. So they actually chopped it down just so it said kill a cop. It's like, you know. But anyways, that's just my that was just my little question that I was throwing out there. We're only seeing a minute of this video. How's it going to turn out? And how's Joe going to spin this video?
Also, Flav, I just want to remind you to keep track of the time.
The time, yep, no doubt. I have a 6 o'clock thing for work where we're doing texting, like on Black issues, like defunding the police and stuff like that. So I'm gonna have to go a little bit soon. Are folks down to resume after 9 o'clock tonight? Are folks free?
I am.
Are you free?
This is possible. I like that. I like this conversation on current events, because, like I said, I miss a lot of stuff, digging back on things, and it's good just getting good fresh perspective. Like even the other meeting that you had invited me to previously, that was a Working Families Party meeting. Yeah. It was good just even hearing people talk about current events, you know, and also in a very civil manner, where I'm not having to double back with people and, you know, question some of the intentions or purposes of what they're saying and why they're saying it. Yeah. You know, with the media and the perception of truth, I mean, like you're saying, it's so easy to have these spin factors and to take short sensationalistic emotional statements and spin them into something that they're not. And you know, we've seen that a lot through the years. I mean, my favorite example in that is way back in history with Tesla, where we see a very smart, very poetic individual who gets turned into a total monster by the media, where people are afraid to even stand next to him, and he has to jump from hotel to hotel to live the rest of his life. And, you know, just thinking about that already, I'm quick to kind of let current events simmer a little too, and let some of my, you know, very intelligent friends like yourself to even kind of sift through that a little bit, and not bite right into that sensationalistic draw or that pull. You know, that's why I'm kind of quicker to look at Joe Biden's history or someone's history and kind of look for a pattern, try to recognize a pattern in the language they use and the results too, because you could have great intentions and the results are just awful. I keep on going back to a very capital gains are a big deal, and following money is another reveal. So I'll keep looking for who are these sponsors, who are the people behind them, and that's why I even referenced that the HR 3355, that was an addition to Violent Crimes and Enforcement Act that changed a lot of language. Something simple like a pistol that was a self-defense weapon, that act turned that into an assault weapon. Okay. So now you see a guy with a pistol, now it's an assault already right off the bat that he has that. Even another simpler thing is changing the language from some of the drug issues, which he was very big on, is taking something like cocaine and crack. And he decided in this bill that if crack or cocaine is cut and it's turned into crack, then there's intent to sell. And this person should be treated like a kingpin drug dealer.
Okay.
Now, it's now, yeah. Oh.
So I just want, I actually go on and continue. I want to touch on some things you said because you made some poignant points.
Yeah, the finishing point I was just getting at there is that he took a language that was already hard enough for police to enforce and to put terms, and he escalated the gravity of the situation with that language. Sure. And it did seem to target communities that did not have a lot of communal equity, not a lot of good protections. Even just that self-defense moment. I mean, it's easier to get your hands on a pistol in some cases than a rifle. And turning the pistol into an assault weapon now changes the whole game when it comes to officers in these communities. So I just, there's a lot to unpack with that bill. Those were just two simple things, but there's a lot of details to it. But yeah, please, what are you thinking?
Well, one of the things that you said that's key, right, is follow the money. This is key. You know what I mean? Who's behind these people. And this is something that mattered to me when Barack Obama was running for president. Nothing against Barack Obama, but it just occurs to me, you're going to potentially be the first Black president or marginalized, person that came from a marginalized group in the history of our country, right? So my thought process back then was, from a critical perspective, why you? And who's behind you? You understand what I'm saying? These are things that I had to think about. But that I don't even really want to go down that rabbit hole because that's a different rabbit hole. What I really wanted to touch on was something that you said. The history of Biden's. Does he have a history of certain comments or what have you? And even if you have the best intentions, right? So what I've learned is that he actually does have a history of saying things that can be considered, at the very least, insensitive to the plight of marginalized people. He has a long history of it when it comes to education and how Black people should be educated all the way up to present day. And before we get into that, something else that you said, as someone who came up in the hood, one of my biggest issues has always been how people are penalized differently for having crack or selling crack than for having cocaine or selling cocaine. As someone who used to work in the hospital, every other doctor that's hasn't gone beyond their 3-year on some level is associated with cocaine. On some level. Doesn't mean that they're doing it, but they're next to someone who is. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a Schedule 2 narcotic. It's not even a Schedule 1. It has a purpose in the medical field too in general, and they have access to that stuff.
Yep. And it's wait a minute. Crack is cut cocaine. So you're telling me, when you use the language, and I'm glad that you broke that down, when you use the language that if it is cut, and let's just throw it out there, if it's cut with baking soda, you have an intention to sell. So thus, you're more dangerous than someone who has uncut coke?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not lost on me that two different communities are affected, right? Normally impoverished or marginalized people are affected by crack. Coke is not a poor man's drug.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of memes even point that out. There's mimetic cartoons that'll even show that the big boat and the big stacks of money all associated to that exact depiction you just brought up too.
Or the
You know,
Wall Street
and
folks.
yeah, to the follow the money thing, I was going to say that HR 3355 thing, a lot of money went into privatized prisons and a lot of prisons in general, and a lot of police officers, like a lot of more cops were hired. So a lot of money and funding went into police staffing and into prisons. So when I follow the money on some of his bills and some of what happened, I mean, we could look at statistics about, well, who was incarcerated, what demographics were affected. But if you just look at where the money went and where the funding was redirected, it seems like he may have been sponsoring that movement towards privatized prison systems and towards increased police measures. So that was kind of my takeaway on that whole act and that whole problem. It's interesting you say he has a history of that language. I mean, I find some of his speeches and things that I've seen written out kind of like boring, to say the least. I don't know if that's like not really, it shouldn't really be too entertaining, but like back to people and speakers and meaning what they say and saying what they mean. I mean, I listened to an 8-hour filibuster with Bernie Sanders. Granted, I had some lo-fi music in the background to keep it palatable, and I multitasked and cooked. But like, he had a lot of really valuable information about banking industries being bailed out with public money, and like, do they not have some kind of debt to society? And then holding greater interest levels against us. I mean, he broke down a lot of stuff in this 8-hour filibuster. It was like, that was a day of work, just trying to listen to that. And it was consistent. There wasn't a moment in there. There's not a minute. There's not a 10-second clip.
Lost you.
I don't want to take that away from him, but you know, you're again, as you pointed out, a history of using that language. You know, language says a lot about somebody and how they use it. So that's, you know, that's a good takeaway on that. Politics are very tough to get into talking about.
Oh yeah. You know, before you came on, I was saying how at the very least, you know, the question came up, you know, so Biden, I don't think that he's racist, right? I think that, and as Flav said before you came on, you'll probably see the show, I've been very controversial in my opinion on that, because I don't think that every instance, you know, every time somebody exceptions. So I don't think, oh, Flav is having trouble hearing what's going on. I don't think in every case it screams racist. That having been said, I don't think Joe Biden is racist. I certainly think he's out of touch. I think he's insensitive. And the reason why, especially this year, like you're running for president, right? And there's some things that, you know, there's a track record that if I'm looking at just this year alone, right?
Yeah, Long Island specifically.
Okay, so you know, during this COVID pandemic, the most visible Democrat was Cuomo.
Yes. Yeah, King Cuomo.
Right. Like we pretty much didn't hear anything. It's interesting. The conservative arguing point is hiding Biden is, you know, what they're running with. You know what I mean? And you know, then during this recent civil unrest, when we did finally hear from Biden, it was to come on a show and literally tell the black host of the show, if you don't know whether or not you should vote for Biden or Trump, you're not black.
Right, I remember hearing that. That seemed a little weird. That was one of those things I'm like, is that fake news?
No, that happened.
Yeah.
It was an 18-minute interview. He discontinued the interview probably seconds after that. And then he gives $300 million to the police.
So if I can jump in for a second, there's something interesting going on about Damien saying that Joe Biden's speeches are boring. And remember I was saying before, you'd almost rather put your foot in your mouth. You can't hear me?
I can hear you. You're just green.
Well, don't worry about how I look. You guys are frozen to me. So you'd almost rather put your foot in your mouth and have an interesting speech than be boring, right? Like as a speech giver, I don't know if you've ever given a speech. There's nothing more nerve-wracking than just feeling like you're just dying in front of your audience, and that you are just not.
You don't want to put the room. You don't want to put the room to sleep.
You don't want to put the room to sleep. You'd almost like, you'd almost like do a gaffe, You'd almost like do a gaffe.
You make a bad joke like Obama saying that Kamala Harris is the best looking DA in the country.
Yeah, well, I had a supervisor that made a joke that was, it came off as racially insensitive, but it was like he was friends with this other person, of another race, and they had their inside joke, but he said it in front of all of us, and it was just out of context, and he was like, he just like basically turned red, but it was still like it was still like an on fire kind of speech, and I just remember having sometimes to have like, I had to throw my notes away, and I'd rather give a slightly shorter, like cool sounding speech where I'm connecting to people and asking questions and having people interact rather than trying to like go off of the notes. but let me enter something that might be controversial. Is Joe saying things that it's messed up because he's saying them, but is there some truth to them? Does the Black community have, well, let me put it more positively. Does the Latinx community have a greater diversity of stances on immigration than other communities do? Maybe including the Black community? I don't know. And then the issues question, why even bring up the Black community in that sentence anyway? If he had strictly just said, the Latinx community has a plethora of feelings on immigration, it's very, very diverse, varied ideas and thoughts on immigration, that would have been interesting to hear. But it's like he had to like throw another group under the bus and be like, yeah, unlike this group over here, this group.
So I think a better question is more specific. What or is there an overarching sentiment in the Black community on immigration? Like, is there one?
That's more direct. That's more direct. That's a good question. That is a good question.
It's something I've personally never explored.
Yeah. That's a good question, because it's like, we probably just assume what people think, right? But I don't even know maybe that's just not one of those big issues that we talk about. I mean, certainly if you are in immigration community of color, I think you're certainly going to have some stronger feelings than if you are, of the Black community and, your folks have been here for generations and it's just not an issue that you think of. But if you're like,
more often, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, like, they say that Haitians are actually one of the groups that's being most affected by Trump's, out there policies and by the way that immigrants are being treated. I think this was mentioned to get Black folks just thinking about immigration and about the current administration. Because sometimes, like, we don't always put ourselves in the realm of certain conversations or issues, like, oh, it doesn't affect us, but like certainly affects your Haitian friends and probably Trinis and like different Caribbean folks and like different immigrant Black communities, right? We're talking about the difference between communities of color.
Well,
Yeah.
well, I have no problem plopping a cushion down on a limb and taking a seat. So I'm going to do that. I would say I don't necessarily know or think that we consider, like, okay, so in most cases, when you talk about immigration, the idea is we're talking about Latinx people. Now, that having been said, from a Black perspective, and here I am, legs dangling off the limb, I will say a couple things. I'll say one, more often than not, we have a contentious relationship with African immigrants, who I don't even think we put under the immigration umbrella when we think about Latinx people. Two, I feel that our culture is we're averse to aligning with other marginalized groups and embracing their plights. I'm saying that because I just think we are as a whole. I think we're very, 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 very much reluctant to accept any type of partnership with other marginalized groups.
Would that include Haitians?
That would include Haitians. That would include Latinx people. That would include the LGBT community.
Okay.
I think we, on some level, and almost on some level, I don't want to say to the point of discrimination. I'll say to the point of we're just non-empathetic.
Like isolation or
yep. It's this isolationist mentality where, listen, we seem to have a proprietorship or want to have proprietorship on equality. Like it's our thing. I've been in conversations with people who've said to me, someone from the LGBT community, they can hide. We can't hide that we're Black. Their plight isn't on the same level as ours, which I always think is ridiculous when you're comparing oppression. Like, I just think that's the dumbest thing that you can do, is to have an argument over who is more oppressed.
Right, like you always say. I don't know if you've always said this, but like in the past, no, you definitely said this. This is part of a kind of like the theory. In the past, groups have attempted equality in such a way that like you have to wait. It's our turn now.
Mm-hmm.
And then like who's coming next, right? So you said like women did not get Black folks were getting suffrage first, and then women had to wait, but then Black folks ended up losing suffrage, and it was kind of like one group pitted against another. You all can't have it. You all can't have equality at the same time.
Right.
And so
we're not even willing to come together to demand it all at the same time. You got like heterosexual women who can't partner with women of the LGBT community because it could set us back, or it could limit what we're trying to achieve, even though we all should be standing on the same battlefront.
Yeah. No, a lot of what you guys are talking about is having to do with social engineering methods and how culture at a certain point is not really our best friend. And at one point is critical for the development and growth of humanity, but at another point has, like you guys are saying, pitted us against each other and has taken away from civil rights movements that were left off a long time ago. 1971 is a great date to kind of look at because we can see a lot of communities coming together over workers' rights issues. And in labor studies, this is something we went over a bit. But like what ends up happening is, due to racial divide specifically, the movement gets broken up, and a big march on Washington happens, but union labor leaders refuse to join African American workers on this march. And this march led to a great success, but it didn't account for every factor that came into play for working environments. Something that it did lead to into a great success was to help diversify the work environment with a couple of different acts, but probably the most popular was the affirmative action movement. And again, this was great to diversify the work environment, provide that equal opportunity that everybody wanted, but it didn't account for certain details that were lost in the midst of these things. A lot of it was an attempt to break up nepotism and cronyism and a lot of these other isms that end up taking away from true human culture and dividing us into these other cultural aspects, racial cultural aspects that we can see in art, music, and poetry, separate and beautiful for what they are. But when we take it to something like nature and we look at human nature, now all of a sudden culture begins to divide us into something that's becoming kind of unnatural, where we are fighting against each other over things that we would agree on normally.
Right.
But then all of a sudden in these unnatural social engineered situations, we end up not agreeing with each other and misunderstanding each other and no longer having the capacity or the patience to develop an understanding with each other, most of all. And, you know, they're talking about some of what, you know, we opened up with Biden's statement on Latinx culture having more, I don't know what you're saying, what did he say, diversified opinions on immigration? I mean, Latin culture has more ways to immigrate in that respect too then. You know, like if we want to talk about how people get into this country, I mean, I do know somebody who has family members that help with immigration, and they specifically specialize in helping people out of Ghana to immigrate to the US. And they don't really get involved with people immigrating from Mexico or from Cuba or anywhere else. They just help their own people do their own thing. And when we think about diversity and the ways that people get into the country, it would appear as though maybe Biden was talking about the different ways that they get here too. Like maybe his out of touch with reality kind of way of saying it came off very ignorant, but he may have been trying to speak to a more complicated issue with immigration when it comes to that, the way that we have people come into this country and the way we legally integrate them with this country and culture for that matter. But again, it's going to leave us fighting with each other because, you know, these different ways and these different means of understanding each other get lost in the woodwork. You know, even someone listening to this, like as a conversation recorded, they may end up losing some finer points if we don't all each touch the point in our own way. So
one final thing I want to say, we have 3 minutes left. Of what you spoke of kind of reminds me of tribalism. You know,
okay.
Different tribes kind of like fighting for different things. Like when folks look at Africa, for instance, it's a vast continent filled with many different countries, many different people. It's the most diverse place on earth. And each country has many different tribes, and those tribes are often at odds, which those odds have been exacerbated by different people coming through colonizing. But you know, kind of like the old systems of tribes, and I guess what you were describing as culture, often kind of like separate people for reasons that are no longer like necessary or good. Shit, I was going to say something else, but I think I lost my train, so I'll let someone pick it up.
Well, I think it's a good time to get ready to wrap it up. I know you have to go.
Yeah, well, we got another minute or so. I don't have to go until a couple of minutes unless anyone has any final words. Yeah.
I definitely don't have a problem letting Damien have some final words.
Okay.
No, I mean, final words that just touch on one of the main driving points where I revisited a moment in history in 1971 where we were all working together and things were going well. Gross domestic production was on the rise, and so were wages, and so were benefits and rights. and things came together and merged very nicely. But because of our inability to continue to work together after we got comfortable and complacent with some of the new acts and some of the new um, assistance that we all got, we kind of like sat back, and while we were sleeping, they lived off what we slept on. And by they, I mean a lot of these corporate entities that looked for ways to replace the human era with automation. And that's probably one of our bigger fights to think about here that we're being distracted from, is that we have these human errors and flaws that really highlight a lot of great human strengths and components.
Right.
We
Right.
see art, music, poetry, and comedy. But when it comes to this nature versus nurture moment we have, where culture is kind of nurturing us in a way outside of our natural development, we might want to start thinking about that, not to create like, oh, an enemy of my enemy kind of unification, but to understand that there are forces at work that would love to replace us with automation, with things that don't have complaints or don't have issues,